is my first day. Unfortunately, I missed out on yesterday, so please don't tell me what I missed out on. It's heartbreaking. I'm so glad to be here, though, and I think what I'm most excited about is this is a Nomad conference like no other that I've attended, and you guys really walk the talk. The organizers here have been putting so much intention into curating this community and curating all the activities that we're going to get up to. Everything from procurement to the volunteering we're doing tomorrow. So I'm really excited to be here. And I also did want to point out, everything I'm sharing today, it's not coming from a place of expertise at all. It's actually, a lot of this is crowdsourced. It's stuff that you guys are already thinking about, that you're already wondering, how can we do this better? And so really, I'm just sharing a few ponderings and a few thoughts. And I invite you to continue this conversation with me over the weekend as well. So NSR, Nomad Social Responsibility. You're probably thinking, not another acronym. No, don't worry. This one is nothing fancy. But have any of you guys heard of this term floating around at all? I got a couple of hands. Cool, because I completely made it up. So earlier this year, I was invited to speak at CU Asia about a topic, a burning passion of mine. And I've been working in the social impact ecosystem, sorry for the jargon, social impact world, so working to support social entrepreneurs for a couple of years. And I started working as a digital nomad about 3 years ago with a crowdfunding company called Start Some Good. So we helped entrepreneurs and we helped communities raise funds towards their social initiatives. Often it was starting social businesses. And our team was completely remote. My co-founders, my colleagues, they were in the US, they were in the UK. I was the only one in Asia, and I was really building up that community in Southeast Asia. So being a cultural chameleon, I'm a bit of a third culture kid. I know there's a lot of you out here. Anyone else third culture kid? I met a couple of people who identify. My mother is Indonesian. My father's British. I have an Australian passport, and I studied there. And I have a strange, funny, pseudo-Canadian accent, so it's very hard to pick. But like many of you, I feel like I was born to be a nomad. You know, I was ready for it before the term existed, the digital nomad term. And I currently work with Venture, so we're a location-independent collective of purpose-driven consultants, and currently setting up Impact Hub Jakarta, which is a co-working space for purpose-driven individuals and organizations. So, as I mentioned, I was working with Start Some Good, and my job was really to cultivate the community of entrepreneurs in Southeast Asia. It was a tough gig. I had to bounce around Southeast Asia, traveling from one city to another, running workshops, and getting to know what social entrepreneurs needed. And this burning question in the back of my head was, this digital nomad movement is fantastic. It's encouraging an incredible flow of ideas, people, and capital. But is it coming at a cost as well? I didn't have the answer to this, but I did want to start that conversation. And as I mentioned, I had the opportunity to do that at the CU Asia conference in Bali earlier this year. And it was an interesting observation for me because I spent about a year based out of Ubud. I know it's come out a lot based out of Ubud, and spent a lot of time with the Ubud community. And I think coming from a place where I was both Indonesian, but also a digital nomad, and looking at the tensions between this, I did notice, where do we fit into this picture? Where do we fit into a space where we're not travelers or tourists, nor are we expats? We're somewhere in between, and we come from a place of a different intention when we spend time with these communities and choose to live in new communities. It comes from a place of curiosity. It comes from a place of creating positive impact or wanting to create positive impact. And in my time in Bali, it is such a strong spiritual place, a beautiful place. And there's a Balinese philosophy called Trihita Karana. Has anyone heard of it? Of course, Renee. Maybe a few of you have heard of it, but it's a guiding philosophy that I use in my lifestyle. But it basically describes the interactions and the harmony that one should have between one another, the environment, and to your spirit or to your God. And I felt this immense contrast sometimes, spending time in these communities and feeling like we haven't got this balance right. and the contrast of being in a deeply spiritual place where I did still see, honestly, some tensions here and there. And maybe I was acutely attuned to that because of my upbringing and my cultural difference. So observing some of the less sexier side of this digital nomad movement, seeing some tensions come up and people really bubbling themselves out of truly connecting, I wanted to think about how we can better support this for one another, recognizing it, and then creating possible solutions. And knowing that, again, none of us are experts. We can only really offer and be aware of this and really acknowledge it. And we need to stop ignoring it as, something on the side, but really embrace it as part of being in this community. What can we practically do? So after this talk at CU Asia, we decided spontaneously, okay, let's get together and let's discuss and see what emerges from the community. And I was amazed because it was very spontaneous. We didn't have any planning around this, but we had a bunch of people come over and we sat down with a big mind map, and I love mind mapping, so this was really fun. And we mapped out what we felt our values were as nomads. Again, referring to where we exist in the space, not necessarily as tourists nor expats, but what legacy do we want to leave in these communities, and what potential there is. So we mapped out a couple of things, and I did want to share with you some of our observations, some of the shared challenges we felt, and also some of the opportunities we saw. So we know that travel as a whole is not always sustainable, and there aren't that many options to do it sustainably. We know that there are negative impacts on the environment when we do travel, and also a sense of cultural erosion. And this is something I definitely did see in smaller communities where there was an imbalance between the expat community or the foreign community and local host community. And this bubble effect where we can get really comfortable in our own spaces. I think someone was mentioning this morning that, sometimes you spend so much time either in that co-working space or in that cafe, not really experiencing what's outside of that. That disharmony or tension that can build up over time. And I think this is one of the most damaging aspects, and we don't want the movement to go that way. And I do feel more broadly, there's more that we can do to encourage inclusivity in this movement. So I've noticed that there is a rise of more Indonesians, for example, becoming digital nomads, and that's awesome. And I want to see more of them in these co-working spaces and immersed in these communities. There's, of course, sometimes a bit of an imbalance with gender that we talked about as well. And also, I do think about, this is a privileged lifestyle. Not everyone can become a digital nomad. It costs money to travel, and it comes with a certain level of privilege that we do need to acknowledge. And when you think about these challenges, it can feel really overwhelming because this movement is growing and growing. And there was a prediction, or Peter Levels, he predicted that we'll have 1 billion digital nomads by 2035. And when you think of all these challenges, it feels even scarier to think those challenges will grow with the number of people part of this movement. But I want to reframe this as well, because with these challenges, there are also immense opportunities. So I'm really excited with this global flow of new ideas, of new cultures mingling together, people meeting in digital spaces and then connecting in real life as well. All these resources that are now brought into spaces that wouldn't normally have access to these resources. And specifically as nomads, the kind of skills that we can bring to places that wouldn't normally have those skill sets. It can really help boost the local economy. So we're talking about, basically your purchasing, your procurement by just being in that place, provided you source locally, that is. And also the jobs that you can offer in your businesses as nomads or as entrepreneurs. I'm also excited about what this can do for catalyzing local innovations as well, bringing fresh ideas to new places, framing things in a certain way. And there's events like social innovation weekends that can help catalyze this kind of stuff. And I guess in a more meta level, I'm also interested to see how this movement is going to impact global consciousness or our empathy for one another, empathy for other cultures. And as a third culture kid, I really look forward to the day where I'm not going to be defined by my background or nationality, but as a global citizen, and that these physical geographic boundaries just fizzle out. That's what I'd love to see. And I think this movement has potential to help shape these values and these attitudes. So that's all cool. We get it. This is important. But what's in it for me? Why should I care? Why should we care? And that's an important question. As I said, I believe that this movement, as it is growing, is powerful. And we play a powerful role in shaping the discourse around global transient communities, being a positive force rather than a negative force. And sometimes it is shaped that way. And I know that in some communities, there has been this tension between the outsider coming in. And these values and attitudes can be shaped by us if we have the intention and we are expressing that in our actions. I also think to get away from the more fluffy stuff, it's not just a nice thing to do. It makes a lot of sense. This sustainability of this movement that we're all part of, it relies on our ability to sustain the people, the planet, and all the places we encounter. If we cannot maintain this harmonious relationship with the environment, with each other, with the new cultures we become part of, this movement won't exist for any of us anymore, and we'll just widen that gap. So these are some of the reasons why we need nomad social responsibility. And most of all, I really do believe your experience is going to be so much richer if you embrace some of these principles or if you have this consciousness. And it doesn't take a lot. It's just there are a few little things that can be done. And the conversation's not over yet, of course. I'm really keen to hear your ideas on how we can do this together. So NSR, that acronym, basically it comes from a place of intention and accountability. There are a lot of people already doing socially responsible things and living their lives in a socially responsible way. But if we do really want to set the bar high, if we do really want to move the needle on larger consciousness, it's about creating this level of awareness, a level of accountability, and some support. So the same way CSR works in the corporate community, it gives us a place of accountability, a standard to reach. We want to do the same for the nomads and the nomad community. And it's really, when it comes down to it, it's about these core tenets around balancing social and environmental impacts of our lifestyle and increasing that community participation and inclusion that is going to help sustain this lifestyle. So what can we do? And these are some of the ideas that I've crowdsourced from the people I've met and what I've seen other people doing, of course. But there are very, very simple acts that we can all take part in. One of which is sourcing locally and buying locally, like I mentioned. Super simple, but it's going to increase your engagement and interaction with the local community, and it's also going to help contribute to the local economy. Recruit local talent. This is super huge. I think it's really tricky when we go into new communities and we, again, level ourselves off, building a business, but not including the local context around us. We're missing an opportunity to share our skills organically and to really build the local capacity of people. Participate in skilled volunteering. And I know Renee mentioned this as well. There's a real difference between tokenistic volunteering that can actually cause a bit more detrimental effects than we intend, and one that's carefully matched and really matches the needs in the community and the unique skills you might be able to provide as a nomad. Simple things like learning language and local customs. And this is it might seem like not such a big deal, but it goes a long way. And increasingly as we go into smaller communities and more remote communities, we need to make sure we're also protecting the local heritage there and we're not contributing to this cultural erosion or bringing our own values and attitudes to a place that's foreign to us. And some of the more practical ways you can do this is through things like community immersions that I know some spaces are doing, and I'm going to talk a bit more about some of those case studies, as well as homestays. And somehow I'm waiting for someone to build like a Airbnb, but like for homestays to make it super easy to do this, because again, that matching process is really resource intensive, and it needs to come from a place of a strong and deep relationship with the community. It's not something we can often go in and do ourselves very well, that is. So who are some of the cool people doing this? I'm going to mention Hoop. I know Hoop's got a lot of love, but they are doing really cool stuff, and they are pioneering some incredible initiatives. Simple and, more in-depth programs. So some of the things I'm doing in Jakarta, for example, is a social innovation weekend, and I know Hubud's done a few of these as well. And I've seen the product of these events, these hackathons, where you bring in dynamic challenges at a local level and combine the knowledge and expertise from the global community. And I have a friend who actually started a business, a local Balinese, young Balinese, awesome kick-ass guy. And he was so inspired, and so he learned so much just through that 54-hour process, as well as the confidence to move his business forward. He now runs community immersions in West Bali, where he comes from, Wira. I don't know if some of you probably know him. So he takes nomads, travelers alike, to see the real part of Bali. And this is really part of lifting that consciousness as well. So as a social entrepreneur, he's combining that business framework with also something that's going to be really impactful for the local community. Simple things like running a language crash course is so important. When people land into a new place, what is one of the most practical things you can do to make them feel a little bit more connected and to show that level of respect and awareness that you're in a new place that's not your own? Our friends over in Thailand, there's a project called Trash Hero. I actually think this has grown all over the place, so it's not just in Thailand anymore. But simple things like organizing trash pickups on the local beach. A lot of these digital nomad spaces are now, in these tropical, beautiful, serene locations, and they're there assuming that it's always going to stay that beautiful and tropical and clean. But that's not so unless we also participate in those efforts. And then I think there's also a greater role that the spaces or service providers, for lack of a better word, can also implement. And I'm talking about the co-working spaces, I'm talking about the cafes, and also events like 7 and 7, which is why I think it's so cool you guys have taken that step, taken that initiative so proactively. And I've seen a lot of these, again, at Hubud and other spaces, but just simple things like implementing eco-innovations, whether that's using natural filters or it's using solar power. Things like that have a big impact, both on inspiring others, but creating tangible, efficiencies. Being able to subsidize local memberships. Like I said, this nomad lifestyle is sometimes one of great privilege, and what we can do to increase and include community participation is through this. I know Outpost, for example, in Bali, they provide a scholarship or internship for local Balinese to have them included in the community as well. And often, many spaces, there is a reduced rate to make sure that inclusion is considered. Creating these events and opportunities for cross-cultural exchange. Again, like I said, things like Social Innovation Weekend can play a huge role in that, but also ongoing events where you can have the local community pitching a challenge that they might need help around, or even having them cater and run a long table lunch at the space. Mentorship is actually another big one. So I had a chat with Jeff from Angkor Hub. Has anyone been to Angkor Hub in Siem Reap? A couple of people. So they're pioneering some cool stuff. They're working directly with local Khmer students and actually having them work from the space, developing their professional skills, but also at the same time being exposed to all these new cultures and communities they otherwise wouldn't have the chance to encounter. And those things are really powerful. I've had the chance to talk to some of the local people who have worked out of places like Hubud, and it's transformational to see that change in them in terms of leadership and in terms of cultural awareness. And I think it is a really important and a really difficult role to play that we don't acknowledge as often. Some of these co-working spaces or running events like this, building those meaningful community connections, those relationships, it can take years. It can take years. But it plays an important service to the nomads who come into those communities by being that bridge and ensuring that anything we do as nomads in trying to give back is really done the right way where it's needed the most. So I did mention some of these spaces that are already doing this, and we're starting, as this movement, we're starting to map out who are the co-working spaces currently doing this, what are the initiatives out there, eventually compiling some case studies so we can learn. Because as thirsty as nomads are as well to learn about how they can be more socially responsible, we're getting the same response from co-working spaces too. How can I be a more conscious co-working space? How can I implement these things? Because I also believe that I'm part of this greater movement. And when I talk about the NSR movement, the Nomad Social Responsibility movement, what does that mean exactly? So I'm really passionate about seeing an intentional community behind this and how this might start. And these are some of the ideas that we came up with after the talk in Bali. How this might start is maybe even as something as simple as a manifesto. Because if we're going to start inspiring others, we need to be clear on our values. We need to be clear about what do we care about and share a united voice. And I think that's a really simple step forward that we can take as a community. Of course, it must be co-created. So later I will invite you to co-create this with me. And it's about accountability as well. So I think setting the intention and saying, you know, we care about social, nomad social responsibility. And creating, I'm going to say better practice guidelines, because I don't think there's such thing as best practice necessarily. And we're always learning, and we need to acknowledge that we're always learning. I come from a development background, and what we thought was good development at one stage and best practice has changed a lot. And this is still a new movement, and we're going to learn a lot. So developing some guidelines around what is this better practice. And something we've already started is a Facebook community, a Facebook group, so that we can also connect to like-minded tribes and ask each other these questions, you know? And that's already active. So I invite you also to join that group on Facebook. And another thing, as I mentioned, was these case studies. So deeper case studies that we can crowdsource from all parts of the world, see what people are doing, what's been working, what hasn't been working. And case studies that can reflect also what hasn't worked, because we need to learn from these failures too, and to be open and transparent about that. And also, in a more practical sense, a directory. And maybe Kiri, like, you can help contribute to this so much, because it is all about, you know, if I'm running an event, how do I source locally and responsibly? How do I do it in such a way that's going to be positive rather than negative? And so actually listing service providers and different products that can be used, whether you're running an event at a co-working space or a conference like this. And again, I'm still waiting. Can someone build that app for homestays? Because I think that would be awesome. Looking at you, Nick. So looking at how we can build this movement, these are some of the ideas that we came up with. And of course, the story continues. We're really only just starting now. So it's been part of an ongoing question for me on how we move forward. And coming from a place of co-creation, I do want to invite you all, and I found this to be a very unique opportunity to invite you all to be part of this, because what I see here is a real tribe of like-minded people, people who are in the Nomad movement for the long run. And so I do see you as key players in driving this. So we're starting the movement now, nomadsocialresponsibility.com. We are starting the manifesto, we're starting mapping, and we do need help. So I'm also going to plug that tomorrow, after we have our volunteering activity in the morning with Steps with Thera, we're going to have a bit of a mastermind together to look at how we can take the next steps, because we need to be about action too. And I invite you, if you have these skills that can be offered in terms of, you know, mapping out different initiatives that you've seen, contributing to some guidelines or documents, helping us with branding, that would be awesome. And I'd love to hear your ideas as well, if they weren't already cited in my presentation. So really, it's really simple. I don't want you guys to think about it as some scary acronym. It really is just about making things easier for us to be part of this collective good, to create impact collectively together. It's that simple. And when I think about why this is important and why the digital nomad movement is important to sustain, is that our happiness is only real when it's shared. When we can share this gift that we have of, like, being able to pursue our passions, travel the world, immerse ourselves in a constant environment of learning, we want to share that with others too. So it is in our best interest to sustain this movement, and I invite you all to join with me. Walk the talk with us, with 7 and 7. I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow who are joining in the morning and who want to be part of co-creating this together with us. And thank you for listening to some of my thoughts.